Next, I want to introduce you to a new CSS property which is used specifically with rectangular objects like we have here. And this guy is, well, you could think of this guy as almost like a text wrap. Essentially what I want to do is I want to take the content that appears below my object, British Columbia, Victoria, and so on, and I want to have it wrap around this object, either wrap around the left-hand side of this object or the right-hand side of this object. Now, this CSS property in question is referred to as float. So we can literally float an object. We can pull it out of the normal flow, the normal document flow, and have it appear either on the left-hand side of our screen or over on the right-hand side of our screen. It is used exclusively in CSS page layouts. So let me introduce it to you. I'm going to flip back over, of course, to my code, and of course I'm going to throw this on to my ID selector bulleted list. So I'm going to add this guy right onto the end of this CSS rule. Now, how this guy works, to actually code him, it's very easy. I'm simply going to type in float, :space, and then I'll go left. So we're going to float this guy to the left. Go ahead and save your document and flip back to your browser and refresh. And of course, now what happens is all of the content that appears below my bulleted list div now appears on the right-hand side of this div, of the blue object. So the blue object, the blue div, is now floating over on the left-hand side of my screen, and everything wraps around it. Wonderful. That's exactly what we were after. Now, my question, though, is how come there's so much empty space around this guy? Any ideas? Well, if you've been paying attention, you know about margin. And if you remember anything about margin, you remember that margin is the space on the outside of the object, right? So I have margin above this guy and below this guy, and also on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. So what I can do now is I can go back to my code, I can look for my margin property, and I can go and change those values. And I think what I'll do here is I'll reduce down the values. Maybe I'll change it to 50 pixels for both the top and bottom and also the left and right. So 50 pixels all the way around, just like that. Save this guy up, back over to the browser and refresh. There we go. So now I've collapsed down that empty space, and now we have something like this happening. So of course, now we can obviously see that my blue div is now floating on the left-hand side of the layout, which is great. Now, there are two different ways to float. We can, of course, float to the left, but we can also float to the right as well. So let me show you that. So rather than floating to the left, I'm going to change this to right and then save this guy up, back over to the browser and refresh. And there we go. Now, my blue div, my bulleted list, is now floating over on the right-hand side of my screen. And of course, the content that appears below the object now flows around the left-hand side. That's how that works. So literally what we've done is we've taken this div, this blue div, once again, and we've pulled it out of the main flow of the document, and we've forced it to appear either over on the right-hand side or over on the left-hand side. And this is a great introductory to the concept of floating.